And welcome back to Friday Reads, where we help you find your next read. I'm Jill.
And I'm Julie. So if you watched us last week, we were in the 1950s. So this week we're just jumping ahead 10 years and we're going to be in the 60s, the time of John F. Kennedy's presidency and hippies and free love. So we will see what kind of book picks we have from the 1960s. What do you got, Jill?
My first one is Whistling Past the Graveyard by Susan Crandall. This was published in 2013. The summer of 1963 begins like any other for 9-year-old Starla Claudel. Born to teenage parents in Mississippi, Starla is being raised by a strict paternal grandmother, Mammy, whose worst fear is that Starla will turn out like her mother. Starla hasn't seen her mother since she was 3, but is convinced that her mother will keep her promise to take Starla and her daddy to Nashville, where her mother hopes to become a famous singer, and that one day her family will be the whole and perfect. When Starla is grounded on the 4th of July, she sneaks out to see the parade. After getting caught, Starla's fear that Mammy will make good on her threats and send her to reform school cause her to panic and run away from home. Once out in the country, Starla is offered a ride by a black woman, Eula, who is traveling with a white baby. She happily accepts the ride with the ultimate goal of reaching her mother in Nashville. As the two unlikely companions make their long and sometimes dangerous journey, Starla's eyes are open to the harsh realities of 1963 Southern segregation. Through talks with Eula, reconnecting with her parents, and encountering a series of surprising misadventures, Starla learns to let go of long-held dreams and realizes family is forged from those who will sacrifice all for you, no matter if it is bound by blood or by heart. So, a little bit of a road trip book.
Sounds like a fun one.
1960s.
My first pick comes from a popular author that we've covered before. This is Colson Whitehead's Harlem Shuffle. He's the Pulitzer Prize-winning author of The Underground Railroad and The Nickel Boys. And this one takes place in Harlem in the 1960s. Ray Carney was only slightly bent when it came to being crooked. To his customers and neighbors on 125th Street, Carney is an upstanding salesman of reasonably priced furniture, making a decent life for himself and his family. He and his wife Elizabeth are expecting their second child, and if her parents on Strivers Row don't approve of him or their cramped apartment across from the subway tracks, it's still their home. Few people know he descends from a line of uptown hoods and crooks, and that his facade at normalcy has a few cracks in it, cracks that are getting bigger all the time. Cash is tight, especially with all those installment plan sofas, so if his cousin Freddie occasionally drops off the odd ring or necklace, Ray doesn't ask where it comes from. He knows a discreet jeweler downtown who doesn't ask questions either. Then Freddie falls in with a crew who plans to rob the Hotel Teresa, which is the Waldorf of Harlem, and volunteers Ray's services as the fence for the heist. The heist doesn't go as planned. They rarely do. Now Ray has a new clientele, one made up of shady cops, vicious local gangsters, and other assorted Harlem lowlifes. So this story was described as an ingenious story playing out in the beautifully recreated New York City of the early 60s. It's a family saga masquerading as a crime novel, a hilarious morality play, a social novel about race and power, and ultimately a love letter to Harlem. But mostly this book is a joy to read. So if you want to check out something you haven't maybe read by Colson Whitehead, check out Harlem Shuffle.
I do like that author.
I do too.
My next one is They Come in All Colors by Malcolm Hansen. It's 1968 when 14-year-old Huey Fairchild begins high school at Claremont Prep, one of New York's most prestigious boys' schools. His mother has uprooted her family from their small hometown in Acresburg, Georgia, a few years earlier, leaving behind Huey's white father and the racial unrest that ran deeper than the Chattahoochee River. But for our sharp-tongued protagonist, forgetting the past is easier said than done. At Claremont, where the only other non-white person is the janitor, Huey quickly realizes that racism can lurk beneath even the nicest school uniform. After a momentary slip of his temper, Huey finds himself on academic probation and facing legal charges. With his promising school career in limbo, he begins examining his current predicament at Claremont through the lens of his childhood memories of growing up in Acresburg during the Civil Rights Movement and the chilling moments leading up to his and his mother's flight north. With Huey's head-shaking antics fueling this coming-of-age narrative, the story triumphs as a tender and honest exploration of race, identity, family, and homeland. So they come in all colors. It's got a little sticker there.
My second pick is a book that I really liked. This is The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. This was published back in 2001, so it's a little older book. Got a 4.08 rating on Goodreads. Also liked the movie, Secret Life of Bees. So it's set in South Carolina in 1964, and it tells the story of Lily Owens, whose life has been shaped around the blurred memory of the afternoon her mother was killed. When Lily's fierce-hearted black stand-in mother, Rosaline, insults three of the deepest racists in town, Lily decides to spring them both free. They escape to Tiburon, South Carolina, a town that holds the secret to her mother's past. Taken in by an eccentric trio of black beekeeping sisters, Lily is introduced to their mesmerizing world of bees and honey and the Black Madonna. This is a remarkable novel about divine female power, a story women will share and pass on to their daughters for years to come. So I totally agree with the 4.08 rating, like the book, and like the movie.
That book was great. It's a great book. Classic. My next one is Ordinary Grace by William Kent Krieger. Like many of William Kent Krieger's books, this one takes place in Minnesota, so it's a little close to home. New Bremen, Minnesota, 1961. The Twins were playing their debut season. Ice-cold root beers were selling out at the soda counter at Halderson's drugstore, and hot stuff comic books were a mainstay on every barbershop magazine rack. It was a time of innocence and hope for a country with a new young president. But for 13-year-old Frank Drum, it was a grim summer in which death visited frequently and assumed many forms. Accident, nature, suicide, murder. Frank begins the season preoccupied with the concerns of any teenage boys. But when tragedy unexpectedly strikes his family, which includes his Methodist minister father, his passionate artistic mother, Juilliard-bound older sister, and wise beyond his years kid brother, he finds himself thrust into an adult world of secrets, lies, adultery, betrayal, and suddenly called upon to demonstrate a maturity and gumption beyond his years. Told from Frank's perspective 40 years after that fateful summer, Ordinary Grace is a brilliantly moving account of a boy standing at the door of his young manhood, trying to understand a world that seems to be falling apart around him. So,
one of my favorite William Kent Krieger books.
He's a good author.
Yeah, love that one. My third pick is The Help by Catherine Stockett. Again, going back in time a bit, this was published in 2009. Three ordinary women are about to take one extraordinary step. 22-year-old Skeeter has just returned home after graduating from Ole Miss. She may have a degree, but it's 1962 Mississippi, and her mother will not be happy till Skeeter has a ring on her finger. Skeeter would normally find solace with her beloved maid Constantine, the woman who raised her, but Constantine has disappeared, and no one will tell Skeeter where she has gone. Abilene is a black maid, a wise, regal woman raising her 17th white child. Something has shifted inside her after the loss of her own son, who died while his bosses looked the other way. She's devoted to the little girl she looks after, though she knows both their hearts may be broken. And then we have Minnie, Abilene's best friend. She's short, fat, and perhaps the sassiest woman in Mississippi. She can cook like nobody's business, but she can't mind her tongue, so she's lost yet another job. Minnie finally finds a position working for someone too new to town to know her reputation, but her new boss has secrets of her own. Seemingly as different from one another as can be, these women will nonetheless come together for a clandestine project that will put them all at risk. And why? Because they are suffocating within the lines that define their town and their times. And sometimes lines are made to be crossed. In Pitch Perfect Voices, Catherine Stockett creates three extraordinary women whose determination to start a movement of their own forever changes a town and the way women, mothers, daughters, caregivers, friends view one another. So, love the book. I don't have a copy of the movie for this one, but love the movie for this one also. So 2 in a row with a book and a movie pick.
I remember the pie. Do you remember the pie?
Absolutely.
You'll never look at pie the same. So my next one, I thought this one was kind of interesting. This is Mrs. Kennedy and Me by Clint Hill. Clint Hill was Jackie Kennedy's personal secret service agent during, the presidency. So I think this sounds interesting to me. In those 4 years, Hill was by Miss Kennedy's side in some of the happiest moments as well as the darkest. He was there for the birth of John Jr. on November 25th, 1960, as well as for the birth and sudden death of Patrick Bouvier Kennedy on August 8, 1963. 3.5 months later, the unthinkable happened. 47 years after the assassination of John F. Kennedy, the one vivid image that never leaves Clint Hill's mind is that of the President Kennedy's head laying on Mrs. Kennedy's lap in the back seat of the limousine, his eyes fixed. Blood spattered all over the back of the car. Mrs. Kennedy, and Hill as well, sprawled on the trunk of the car as it sped away from Dealey Plaza. Hill clung to the sides of the car, his feet wedged in so his body was as high as possible. Clint Hill jumped on the car too late to save the president, but all he knew after that first shot was that if more shots were coming, the bullets had to hit him instead of the First Lady. Mrs. Kennedy's strength, class, and dignity over those tragic 4 days in November 1963 held the country together. And here you can hear like a first-hand account of it. So, Mrs. Kennedy and me.
My fourth pick is also a popular author. This is Mrs. Everything. This is published in 2019 by Jennifer Weiner. Joe and Bethy Kaufman were born into a world full of promise. Growing up in Detroit, they live in a perfect Dick and Jane house where their roles in the family are clearly defined. Joe is the tomboy, the bookish rebel, with a passion to make the world fairer. Bethy is the pretty, feminine good girl, a would-be star who enjoys the power of her beauty and confers and dreams of a traditional life. But the truth ends up looking differently from what these two girls imagined. Joe and Bethy survive traumas and tragedies. As their lives unfold against the backdrop of free love and Vietnam, Woodstock and women's lib, Bethy becomes an adventure-loving wild child who dives headlong into the counterculture and is up for anything except settling down. Meanwhile, Joe becomes a proper young mother in Connecticut, a witness to the changing world instead of a participant. Neither woman inhabits the world she dreams of, nor has a life that feels authentic or truly brings her joy. Is it too late for the women to finally stake a claim on happily ever after? Have to read the book, find out what happens. So Mrs. Everything.
My last one is The Astronaut Wives Club by Lily Koppel. As America's Mercury 7 astronauts were launched on a death-defying missions, television cameras focused on the brave smiles of their young wives. Overnight, these women were transformed from military spouses into American royalty. They had tea with Jackie Kennedy, appeared on the cover of Life magazine, and quickly grew into fashion icons. Annie Glenn, with her picture-perfect marriage, was the envy of the other wives. JFK made it clear that platinum blonde Renee Carpenter was his favorite, and licensed pilot Trudy Cooper arrived with a secret that needed to stay hidden from NASA. Together with the other wives, they formed the Astronaut Wives Club, providing one another with support and friendship, coffee, and cocktails. As their celebrity rose and as divorce and tragedy began to touch their lives, the wives continued to rally together, forming bonds that would withstand the test of time, and they stayed friends for over half a century. The Astronaut Wives Club tells the story of women who stood beside some of the biggest heroes in American history. So this is nonfiction, so it's all true and not out of someone's imagination.
My last pick also comes from a popular author here at the library, and it's Ellen Hildebrand's Summer of '69, which was published back in 2019. Welcome to the most tumultuous summer of the 20th century. It's 1969, and for the Levin family, the times they are a-changing. Every year, the children have looked forward to spending the summer at their grandmother's historic home in downtown Nantucket. But like so much else in America, nothing is the same. Blair, the oldest sister, is marooned in Boston, pregnant with twins, and unable to travel. Middle sister Kirby is caught up in the thrilling vortex of civil rights protests and determined to be independent. She takes a summer job on Martha's Vineyard. Only son Tiger is an infantry soldier recently deployed to Vietnam. And then we have 13-year-old Jessie, who suddenly feels like an only child, marooned in the house with her out-of-touch grandmother and her worried mother, while each of them hides a troubling secret. more secrets. As the summer heats up, Ted Kennedy sinks a car in Chappaquiddick, man flies to the moon, and Jessie and her family experience their own dramatic upheavals along with the rest of the country. So this was her first historical novel, rich with details of an era that shaped both a nation and an island 30 miles out to sea. So once again, they say she earns the title as Queen of the Summer Novels. So this goes back a few summers, but check out Summer of '69 if you haven't read it by Ellen Hildebrand.
Awesome. Nice choice. Well, we hope we helped you find something to read if you want to revisit the 60s a little bit.
Find our video on our YouTube channel, on our Facebook page. We love to hear from you. Tell us what you're reading. If you have any books that take place in any of these decades that we've been covering, the 20s, the 50s, the 60s. So until next time, we thank you for watching. Bye.